I get a decent amount of comments on this channel about how unbearably monotone my voice is, to which I can assure you I'm that much less animated when I'm not actively narrating videos about things I'm actually interested in. Hence why my friends would imitate this clip for weeks after I showed them it. The only other time I've managed noise like that was upon a close encounter with a locust the size of my face. What you're listening to there is the equally adrenaline-inducing experience of hearing a Wowaka song live. Specifically my favourite Vocaloid song of all time. For the uninitiated, Vocaloid is a singing synthesizer software released by Yamaha in 2004. Various celebrities have been enlisted over the years to provide voice banks that allow users to put together a song without ever needing to pull out a microphone. It wasn't until Krypton Future Media teamed up with Yamaha to release Hatsune Miku, however, that the software really took off. The voice banks released up until this point had also been assigned characters, but none so cute as the teenage girl who could have walked straight out of an anime and who grew to become a national icon. It's a strange idea when you pitch it straight. It sounds like one of those new innovations you read about in the tech section of the newspaper bound for obscurity. And Vocaloid was, at a time, a hair's breadth away from complete financial failure. It's strange now to think of how close this cultural phenomenon was to never making it out of the gate. See, Vocaloid was my gateway to the world of Japanese popular media. But before all of that, we need to talk about a game called Animal Crossing. Bear with me. This story starts way back in 2006, the year Wild World came out in Europe. Specifically, it starts out in my aunt's flat, where I would watch my cousin play this confusingly titled game on his Nintendo DS. So I'm 9 years old and I'm thinking, wow, this looks really fun. But I don't have a DS. That Christmas, that's what I ask for, and that's what I get. My aunt gets me my very own copy of Wild World, and just like that, my path through life shifts drastically in ways I wouldn't comprehend for some time. I really liked Animal Crossing. In fact, my life revolved around it for a number of years. After school, I would hop on the family PC and search up resources on how to breed flowers, get a villager's picture, or catch one of those fish that I didn't look up how to pronounce the name of before I started recording this video. One day I found a site that housed not only guides but forums where people traded items and planned to visit each other's towns. I swiftly made an account, enticed by the prospect of obtaining rare furniture and meeting even rarer virtual Americans. The game-specific discussions were fun, but I quickly took an interest in the entertainment board where people would talk about basically any other media. Any show, book series, or otherwise vaguely nerdy interest would find itself a dedicated thread where fans and curious bypassers alike could convene and chat. It was here that my love affair with anime began. And as any anime fan of the late 2000s can relate to, I soon found myself happening across a one aqua/teal/cyan/green-haired girl particularly often. I'd seen the word Vocaloid around for some time without much of an understanding of what it actually meant, so when I happened across a thread in this board dedicated to it, I eagerly clicked. The introduction post allowed me to bridge the gaps in my knowledge, and I ended up with just one question. Does anyone have any song recommendations? On this forum, I remember visiting fellow users' profiles and being struck by lists of their favourite bands enshrined in keyboard art. All Time Low, 30 Seconds to Mars, Panic at the Disco. What weird names for bands, I thought. I had some pop groups I liked, but none whose lyrics I would put in my signature, much less dream of one day getting tattoos of. It was a concept that felt strangely foreign to me, and at the same time, that foreignness was something I was all too aware of. The passion with which so many spoke of their favourite artists simply seemed beyond my scope of comprehension. The first way Vocaloid changed me was by flipping the switch. It was a shift in my experience of the world I remember more vividly than most. I don't know if it was the sounds, the ways they were being combined, the array of genres, the foreign language, or the even more foreign androids singing it, but I was instantly obsessed. I fell for Vocaloid fast, and its many facets subsumed my life within months, enough for me to swap out the Animal Crossing forum I'd frequented for years at this point, with one solely dedicated to this newfound interest. All the while I was learning more. If the music itself hooked me, it was what lay beyond that drew me permanently into this world, beyond simply YouTube to MP3ing the songs and going on my way. One of the things that truly sets the Vocaloid scene apart is its innovation. The music is so much more than just that. Back in the late 2000s, song series were all the rage. The most famous instance of this now is the Kagero project, but before Jin, there were producers like Mothi, most famous for his Daughter of Evil storyline utilising the Kagamine twins. In this story, Rin acts as a dictator to the land she rules over out of spite over an unrequited love. When the citizens finally rebel and order her execution, her brother takes her place. But the story that really captivated me personally was Hitoshizuku P's Synchronicity trilogy, also starring the Kagamine twins, as so many of these works did. This story is set in its own medieval land, and once again Len seeks to save his sister from a tragic fate, that of eternally singing in order to keep an ancient dragon from waking. At just a few minutes apiece, these songs beautifully detailed Rin and Len's connection despite being separated at birth, and their longing to be reunited. Through the sparse lyrics and visuals, you're led on a journey that asks you to delve into your own imagination to put the jigsaw pieces together, one that largely relies simply on the emotions the music evokes. It's a wholly unique kind of storytelling, and one that Vocaloid was perfectly primed to tap into. Multiple producers using the same Vocaloids for their own unique stories may seem counterproductive at first glance, but it only served to foster much stronger bonds between these characters and their audience. They were like actors, always equipped for a new and exciting role, but still the figures their fans were growing increasingly attached to. Vocaloid was experimental, evocative, and engaging. I still remember the excitement I felt upon discovering these works. The best Vocaloid songs have mastered minimalist storytelling. They make you feel as though you're standing on the precipice of something so much bigger. See, there's something to these 4-minute worlds. Sometimes surreal and disturbing, others soothing and ethereal. The lyrics are often abstract and poetic in nature. In a world full of people vying for their art to be seen, Vocaloid was the nichest of the niche. Producers were able to explore their deepest and most private thoughts, feelings, and experiences without the worry of making these comprehensible to anybody, never mind palatable. There was a true sense amongst Miku's earliest collaborators that nobody would ever hear these songs. Magic was born of this approach to making music. High schoolers confined to their rooms and salarymen fed up with life would let Miku give voice to their heartache and quietly tuck it into the corners of the internet. The emotion found in these early Vocaloid songs carries an almost drug-like potency that simply cannot be replicated in music produced with a mass audience in mind. Many producers equally treated Miku as an escape from their experiences as part of a band, a chance to make and say exactly what they wanted without compromise. While fan PVs are one of the countless pockets of creativity that have sprung up around this electronic phenomenon, it has remained standard to post Vocaloid songs alongside a single still image. Like this, producers would send their songs out into the world, almost an invitation to try and divine meaning from something almost impossibly personal. Producers in the Vocaloid scene, it seemed, had no limitations. They didn't have to worry about selling albums or mass appeal. As such, it was another hallmark of the medium for these songs to discuss stigmatized subjects in a refreshingly candid way, be it mental illness, societal criticisms, or gay relationships. Here I finally found something else so many others had in music, an ability to understand and be kinder to myself through the sentiments of strangers, a promise that it was okay to simply be me. More than even that, Vocaloid inspired me. This software was an absolute creative catalyst. If you truly love making things, you will make them even if you know nobody will ever see them. Vocaloid embodies this idea. Back in 2007, nobody could have anticipated what all this would grow to become. Nobody was engaging in this incredibly niche hobby for clout. Moreover, if Vocaloid is to have any collective ethos, it is this: when there's a will, there's a way. Producers would work from their bedrooms, drawing the art for their uploads with a mouse, or tuning Miku without any prior music theory knowledge, spurred on by the same realization. A single person made this song? Maybe I can do that too. The idea isn't to avoid studying and improving, but rather not to let those things bar you from making what you want to make now. Perfect is the enemy of good. This honesty on the part of the producers closes the gap that so often exists between us and our idols, inspiring a chain of creation. For me, this translated into any number of things. Because of Vocaloid, I started seriously writing fanfiction, something I still do today. But I also went out and bought a scanner, made a DeviantArt and started learning to draw. And then I started a YouTube channel. Nearly a decade ago, with that specific brand of blind confidence that can only ever be attributed to 13-year-olds, I shut myself in the garden shed one summer evening with a laptop and my mum's £15 conference call headset, recorded myself singing a song in a language I didn't know, slapped a picture on it in Windows Movie Maker and uploaded it to YouTube. Much like the very producers whose songs I loved, I never stopped to consider that someone might actually watch it. Vocaloid was my first ever muse. It helped the desire to make things that I'd had in me for so long finally take form. Don't get out your mini violins, but once upon a time, like every anime-loving preteen, I too was teased for my interests. Now, when people I know in real life find out about this channel, the response is similarly unified. Oh wow, I wish I had a hobby like that. Or, I wish I had something I was that passionate about. The conversation often moves on to their reluctance to try new things, an honest acknowledgement that it's embarrassing to be bad at something. The derision my interests were commonly met with 10 years ago that led me to try and hide them for so long has evolved into admiration. Most of my friends have recently been thrust unceremoniously into the working world. It's so easy for the daily drudgery of capitalism to consume your life until you're only vaguely aware that something's missing. I count myself lucky I found that something, because if it weren't for Vocaloid, I don't know if I ever would have taken that step, back before I became too scared to. It fostered in me a lifelong commitment to creation, to doing things that don't have a tangible reward or obvious worth, in a society that values hard work, the money that results, and little else. A commitment to being, God forbid, bad at something, because when you're having fun, it truly doesn't matter. Also, to caring about things, deeply and unabashedly. A long-existing interest in writing finally became something tangible, as the imagery that came through in the bizarre and beautiful lyrics of these songs inspired me to find my own voice. A love for the characters spurred me to go out, buy a sketchbook and an array of tools, and learn how to draw them. Yes, it was to draw Kaito and Len kissing, but it was still drawing. And what about the YouTube channel? At this point, Vocaloid wasn't just about the music for me, but the people. By delving into the English-speaking fandom, I became connected for the first time to a community of people built around something I truly cared about. Animal Crossing was an important part of my life, but Vocaloid had tapped into my very soul, and I had a need to connect with those who had experienced something similar. Vocaloid's home is a place called Nico Nico Doga, a Japanese video sharing site. Alongside housing the virtual singers themselves, NND soon found itself inundated with real people flocking to cover these songs. It only followed that once Vocaloid had found its audience beyond Japan, the same thing started happening on YouTube. Choruses too came into existence on NND, literally just multiple covers mashed together, often to delightfully chaotic effect. The best of these would find themselves reprinted onto YouTube, and subsequently the idea of pre-arranged collaborations began to take form. Groups of people of varying ability coming together purely to sing songs they loved. In time, as these endeavours became more refined, people would chip in to mix the audio, draw art, and animate a full video. More than even the participation in such projects, I longed for the sense of togetherness I saw reflected in them, as someone who lacked friends with similar interests in real life. I began singing with the actual goal of finding companionship. In the years I ended up spending in this community, I made something like 100 covers, took part in many of these wonderful collaborations, and met people from all over the world. I even met my first girlfriend. It was an experience that defined my early adolescence. Unfortunately, I'd be lying if I said it was all positive. Anyone who has been online from a young enough age eventually learns that they probably shouldn't have been, and just how slippery a slope it can be. It would be irresponsible of me not to say in no uncertain terms that this particular community was a space that housed a lot of very unhappy people, using the internet as an escape and a tool for abuse of all magnitudes. But while it was a community I left with scars, it equally gave me a handful of extremely close friendships that have endured for nearing a decade. The formative experiences I had at this time inevitably and unfortunately complicated my relationship with Vocaloid itself, and around 2014 I dropped out of the scene almost entirely, the music itself becoming muddied with the associations formed. Only once I'd put a few years between myself and that time in my life was I able to dust off the best of the memories and appreciate what lay at their core. The want to connect with others through art. The simple joy of making things with other people. Nowadays, that part of YouTube is awash with highly produced videos that can rake in hundreds of thousands of views. I've seen people make careers out of the skills, connections, and portfolios they fostered in that place. I recently saw someone from this same community singing the ED of an anime I was watching, and not for the first time. But I remember the days where the covers would get maybe a few hundred views, where they were thrown together in an evening using a cheap mic and free software, and where that was enough. That is the enduring beauty of the culture Vocaloid promotes. One without barriers. One that empowered this kind of homegrown creation, and anyone who had the courage to try their hand at it. One that deserves to be remembered. It is no exaggeration to say Vocaloid changed my life. Rather, it seems woefully inadequate. It seems often to be the single most definitive thing that has ever happened to me. It is home to decisions and experiences that changed me forever, for better and for worse. Through both its fantastical songs and the painfully real lessons I learnt in their midst, it broke open my world and showed me what it was to grow up. It was an incredibly raw journey, and it's taken me time to find the inner peace to come back and pay my dues. I hardly listened to Vocaloid for years after I left that community, for fear of opening old wounds. I willfully ignored major releases like Sand Planet, the waves they made mere ripples by the time they reached me. And then, in the summer of 2018, as I was idly browsing Twitter, I saw something. Miku Expo, Europe. Miku was coming to Europe, to London, my hometown, for the first time. It had been long enough that I hesitated. I didn't live in London anymore, I'd never even been to a concert, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to find anyone to come with me. I messaged my best friend, the best friend I'd met in that very community so long ago, and she gave me the final push. I bought my ticket. I have this really vivid memory from a decade back. It takes place in my aunt's flat, the same one that first unknowingly saw me on to this path. I have absolutely no idea why I was there because it wasn't actually a particularly common occurrence, and that's how I know this strange random recollection is real. It was the day I first watched the seminal and iconic Miku's Thanksgiving Festival, the second ever full-blown Vocaloid concert. It was, as far as 12-year-old me was concerned, 2 hours of pure magic. A gorgeously fluid Miku module that would only ever be used a handful of times, breezes through an almost painfully perfect setlist of pure classics, while a beaming, enigmatic band provide an accompaniment and a small, fiercely intense crowd chant without missing a beat. I remember this day so vividly because of the depth of emotion I felt watching these videos. Being moved at one point to tears, not by any particular song, but just the amount of love I had for this crazy, wonderful thing. For someone who at one point simply could not understand what was so special about music, it was another transformative moment for me. There was something indescribable about seeing this entirely online phenomenon translate into something tangible, to see real people who also cared deeply about this thing I had only ever been picked on for liking. My time on YouTube really felt like Miku's heyday. If anything, we were catching the very last ripples of the 2007 boom. I at least was inexplicably certain Vocaloid had hit some kind of ceiling, and would be gone completely in, say, 5 years. As such, I never even entertained the thought of seeing Miku live myself. Adulthood seemed so distant. By the time a self-funded trip to Japan would be remotely possible for me, Vocaloid would be long gone. This I was sure of. Moreover, what of myself? I'll be blunt here. I spent my teenage years flirting with the prospect of suicide. I saw my love for Vocaloid as something carrying an expiry date because my entire life did. The thought that I could still be friends with people oceans away in years to come, or that the hazy spectre of adulthood held a space for the same things I loved as a kid, seemed likewise impossible. Perhaps I wanted it to be. If anything of my life as it stood now remained then, it meant that I was still the deeply unhappy person of the present. My love for Vocaloid came to be defined by this distinctly ephemeral feeling, the understanding that it could never last forever. It was a sharply bittersweet knowledge, unspoken and certain. Time was, in every way, it seemed, running out. Well, Bess, welcome to the present. Any Vocaloid fan has been asked at some point, why would you pay to see a hologram live? Miku and co have caused enough of a stir to make it into the local news of the western cities where the concerts have cropped up, and not always in the nicest of terms. I hope this video has sufficed in answering that question if anyone who would ask it has watched this far, so let me posit the less obvious of responses. You're not there for Miku. I can't speak for everyone, and she and her digital friends are of course integral, but to see Miku as Vocaloid is to fall into the trap. Miku is a voice. I don't just mean that literally. She represents the choice on the part of the producers to create against all limitations, to bare their souls, and to reach out. She represents the overwhelming response to this vulnerability from the audience that has brought her all the way to our shores. She is connection. And, against all odds, humanity personified. I've had the pleasure and privilege of attending Miku Expo twice, in December 2018 and January of this year. Between these two concerts, as any Vocaloid fan will know, Wowaka passed away. Very suddenly and tragically at the age of 31 from heart failure. Wowaka was instrumental to Vocaloid in ways I could not begin to cover in this video alone. Fortunately, one honouring his legacy already exists. In his short time as an active producer, Wowaka made hit after hit, and inspired just about every person using Miku to up their game. Never mind everyone who bought her because of him. He was the valve on this pressure cooker of talent. This college student with minimal knowledge of how to actually make music, and his incredibly raw, unrefined sound sent shockwaves through the community, showing just what this software was capable of in the right hands. He was the absolute emblem of the best thing about Vocaloid. That willingness it inspired to just throw yourself in at the deep end and see what you were capable of. Wowaka was Vocaloid's beating, bleeding heart. His music was messy and angry and pained and loud, a scream that demanded to be heard. That scream ended up resonating with millions. Wowaka was the person who led me into this crazy world. For me, the three tones that sounded at the beginning of Two-Faced Lovers were the threshold for a life forever changed. One raindrop in the deluge that was his impact. But the desperate, cathartic chaos of his music became a refuge for lonely teenagers all over the world. How else could I have found myself 10 years on in a venue thousands of miles from his place of birth, packed with people chanting his name and lyrics, absolutely dedicated to celebrating his music and his legacy? It used to be easy as a fan of Japanese pop culture in the West to feel left behind, especially in the UK, where interest lags behind the rest of Europe and North America, and where we get scraps in the form of a few small conventions per year with 2 or 3 industry guests between them. But Vocaloid has entirely embraced its utterly unexpected achievement of connecting people the world over. For something that began as people making music alone in their rooms, often to the detriment of their real-life relationships, Vocaloid has come to be defined by this sense of community and pride. At the end of each of these concerts, I stumbled dazed onto the lamplit streets of a town which once seemed void of anyone like me, and found myself surrounded by people I could pass any day of the week, talking about something we all collectively loved. In those moments, I felt a profound sense of belonging, and that I truly was part of something bigger. It wasn't really about how much I kept up with it all anymore. Many of the people at these concerts were adults like me, who had evidently attended to honour the wishes of their 13, 15, 18-year-old selves. This shared choice to dig up a piece of the past and unabashedly celebrate it created a sense of closeness that transcended words. If you haven't had the chance to experience waving a light stick with dangerous intensity as you chant to a 4,000-strong rendition of World Is Mine, I hope from the bottom of my heart that once this fucking awful year is over you get to. Nowadays, Vocaloid has shown the sky is the limit. Many of its cover artists and producers have expanded out into mainstream music careers with explosive success. Much like myself, Vocaloid has stirred complicated feelings in these creators, with many stepping away from the scene for years at a time. With their trademark openness, giants like Hachi, Ryo, and Wawaka have shared these thoughts in songs like Sand Planet, Odds and Ends, and Unknown Mother Goose. There can be a feeling amongst producers that Miku has come to define their music, and that their talents have been attributed to someone other than themselves. Yet when they were ready to talk about these struggles, Miku was still there, waiting to give voice to those very thoughts. Such is the paradox. It seems all of us who leave Vocaloid eventually find our way back. Hachi, known far more widely now as Kenshi Yonezu, describes Vocaloid as his hometown, something that will always be there when he wants to return. For 13 years, Miku has been the first sound of the future, and it seems she will be for many, many more. On December 8th, 2018, I attended the first ever Miku Expo Europe's London stop. I was one girl in a crowd of thousands, one person with one story that led me there. I studied the setlist religiously, dutifully learning all the hits I'd missed out on in my years away from the scene. Of course, I was gunning for the classics. Still, London was the last stop of the Europe leg of the tour, and I'd thoroughly spoiled myself on basically the entire thing. This was all but for a mini-set in the middle of the concert that changed with each stop. The songs could have been anything. I savoured the moments of anticipation before each one, the most exciting of the night. There was Glow, a classic ballad that I never realised would sound so beautiful live. I listened to the sound swell, seemingly surrounding me as it washed over the sea of glow sticks, finally truly in the moment. They'd played it recently though, so not too much of a surprise. There was the disappearance of Hatsune Miku. This one shocked me. I had no idea it had ever been played since that concert in 2010, the one I cried over in my aunt's flat. It was barely organised chaos, absolute fan service, and the excitement reached fever pitch. There weren't many songs that could have drawn a bigger reaction. In the seconds between, as the light dimmed, I had no time to consider that if they'd played one song I'd assumed was long since knocked off the set lists, they could play any other they had in the last 8 years. Before the concert, the online friend who I'd managed to rope into coming with me, one I'd met on that Animal Crossing forum no less, asked me what my favourite Vocaloid song was. In all the years since I'd stumbled into a thread on that self-same forum and made a perfectly innocuous post, perhaps a handful of times I had been disloyal and named anything other than the song that changed my life. This time, I found myself answering in a heartbeat, the very same way I would have at the start of it all. Everything, it seemed, had come full circle. I never for a second thought it possible that I might hear it before the night was out. But then I was at Miku Expo London. I'd never thought any of this was in the same universe as possible. Nobody, not even the producers who Miku first lent her voice, thought Vocaloid would stand the test of time. This was the fervour that consumed those first years, so full of passion and creation, a shower of shooting stars surely destined to burn out and fade into the night. Adolescence can likewise seem defined by its transience, every small happiness marked by the knowledge that it cannot last. I had once thought that growing up meant burning bridges, relegating the good to the past along with the bad, and becoming a perfect stranger to my old self. It was no wonder a successful adulthood seemed defined to me by apathy. For so long, after all, caring had meant hurting. Even as I committed to holding on and seeing just what this strange thing called life had in store, I was sure that I would meet it as an entirely changed me. Turns out that's not how it works. No. This was so much better.